The Sound of Freedom is a recent movie which has, at the same time, managed to divide opinions and become a certified box office hit. Now, typically when you think of a Christian film, you think of a cheesy plotline during which a person starts off as an atheist and they make fun of a Christian and then they go on to have some personal crisis before finally falling on their knees and inviting Kevin Sorbo into their heart. And personally speaking, I think those movies are nice and I think they're a lot better than a lot of the stuff that gets made today. But at the same time, they're not exactly great art, nor are they particularly true to life. What you don't think of whenever you think of a Christian film is a gritty, dramatic thriller about rescuing children from sex slavery. And yet, with The Sound of Freedom, that is exactly what we got. It recounts the true story of Tim Ballard, who, whilst working for Homeland Security, managed to disrupt a major child sex trafficking ring and rescue a bunch of children out from that. Now, you would think that such a movie is a fairly cut and dry moral story, that people would broadly agree that what they're talking about is important and necessary, because pretty much everybody's agreed that abusing and trafficking children is among the worst possible things that you can do. But surprisingly, you can find very few movies in recent memory that have had worse treatment from the mainstream media. And they've had this in a couple of ways. The first one has been to simply try and ignore it, to not talk about it. This movie has received almost no coverage from mainstream media. They would not talk about it in the build-up to the film. In fact, even trying to get this movie made was a fight against the who's who of Hollywood. Disney tried to block the release of this film for 5 years. They owned the rights, they refused to sell them, and they put it on the shelf so that it would not get made. That's been one attempt to destroy the movie. The second one is worse though. The second one is that they have invented a new term to slander the morality of this movie by calling it QAnon adjacent.
This film is being marketed to either specific QAnon believers or to people who believe all of the same tenets as QAnon but claim they don't know what it is.
Now, to be clear, I don't really know a lot about QAnon. It's basically an America-based conspiracy theory that has something to do with government and sex trafficking. But what makes that accusation silly is that this is a true story. This story actually happened. Now, obviously, like all true stories, when it comes to turning it into a film, there's going to be a degree of artistic license, but all of the fundamental basics of what have been told here are correct. They're factually accurate, well documented. And there are no claims in this movie about any sort of conspiracy. It's not like every person who opposes child sex trafficking is promoting QAnon. That's not good logic. And it actually gets quite funny when you think about it. Because let's run the maths here for a second. Are the mainstream media trying to say or accidentally admitting that QAnon is true?
No, it's not true.
That's the accusation, right? Hey, look at this true story. That's exactly like QAnon. You know this true account where we actually have footage of the rescue mission going on? Well, the conspiracy theory is just like that. Hold on a second.
What am I saying?
Now, of course, that's not what's going on here. That's not what they're trying to say, but it does show something. What it shows is that their agenda is more important to them than trying to be consistent. And it seems interesting to me that they chose this movie and this topic to be a focal point of criticism. If we take something that's basically the polar opposite of this movie, if we take Cuties, which was a movie released a few years ago, and it was fundamentally all based around a sexualization of preteen girls, well, the mainstream critics were falling over themselves to try and defend that movie. They were all about it. They did not have any moral qualms with that movie being made. But this movie, they do. When it came to Cuties, they were like, oh, it's wonderful. It's avant-garde. We put the girls in the skimpy outfits and it's so true to life. I don't know why I'm French, but it makes sense because I said avant-garde. And yet it's remarkable that they choose to oppose the morality of a movie that goes against the sexualization of children. And so we need to ask the question, why are they doing this? Why are they attacking this film? And I can say this. It's in no way because it's a bad movie. It's objectively speaking really, really good. And even if they did think that, that's not how they've attacked it. They've attacked it by talking about the moral foundations of the movie. And I think the reason for that is this. I don't think that they necessarily have a higher moral view of something like Cuties than they do of something like The Sound of Freedom. I don't think they're opposed to the morality that this movie displays, at least fundamentally. I'm sure there's some of that goes on in Hollywood. Hollywood is not a great place, but I don't think that's why. Here's why I think they're attacking it. I think they're attacking it because they don't like the creators. You see, the people who made Cuties and who make every other movie in Hollywood basically, they are sound, they are acceptable, they are of the left, they are woke. And even though this movie is not political, and even though it's not partisan, the people who make it, well, they're broadly speaking conservative and Christian.
And I gave my career to Jesus. You pick my roles for me.
And so it doesn't matter to them that this movie has one of the most morally clear messages of all time, that sex trafficking is bad. If the wrong people are making it and it would give good publicity to the wrong people, it must be crushed, it must be destroyed. I think Jim Caviezel, who's the main actor in this, is a great example. Jim Caviezel is an awesome actor. He should be an A-lister. He should be in high demand. Everything he's in is really, really good. But instead, because he's a conservative and a Christian, he's frozen out.
Once I made that turn in the passion, they never offered me another studio picture from that point on. I was removed from that list.
I'm really glad God is blessing him because he's starred in two of the greatest faith-based films of all time, this one and The Passion of the Christ. And all of this shows that the ultimate morality of those rejecting this movie, at least those calling it QAnon adjacent, their morality does not lie in doing what is good, it lies in their side winning. And they've made up this phrase to delegitimize the film, to turn audiences away, not because they necessarily disagree with the message, but because they dislike the people who made the film more than they dislike the concept of trafficking kids. And people who do things like that are moral dolts. That's the reality.
Dolts, dunces, dullards, and dumbbells.
However, there's very good news here for us, which is that this movie, in spite of the fact that it has been ignored by the mainstream media, in spite of the fact that they tried to bury it, it has gone on to be an enormous success. Off of its meager $14 million budget, it has gone on to gross $85 million. That's in spite of many theatres not picking it up. It's beaten Indiana Jones, one of the biggest franchises of all time. Now, of course, that doesn't help that Indiana Jones was terrible and Kathleen Kennedy is driving it into the ground, but nonetheless, it has been wildly successful. And I think that this is a great moment for Christian movies and for Christian art in general. In fact, it's actually been a great year for faith-based films. We've already had the Jesus Revolution, which was excellent, and now we have this movie coming straight off the back of that. There is an audience for these movies. If they are well made, people will show up to them and support them, and it should encourage us that movies like these can succeed. So let's get out there, let's support these movies, let's buy tickets. We want to bless the people who make these movies. They're on the same team as us and they are making a difference. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support the channel, please do. You can pick up something from wearecontramundum.com. We've got a lot of great Christian merch out there. You can also support us on Patreon and through PayPal. And if you want to learn more about engaging with mainstream media, then my recent video about the latest Hillsong documentary is for you.